I think this is more so an American-led push to be like, it's done. I don't think Israel would stop. I don't even think Israel wants to stop. If this was left up to Israel, they would do the same thing that they did with Iran or tried to do with Iran. All right, we blasted off. Let's get into it. We have obviously the top news story of the day is the Gaza ceasefire deal that came out this morning, or not this morning, last night. They tried to turn around and make this into like a George W. Bush thing, a GWB thing where, Marco Rubio came up to Donald Trump when he was doing his like Antifa press conference, and he whispered into his ear. But one of the things that was interesting about the whisper in the ear was it wasn't actually about the Gaza ceasefire necessarily, but it turns out the whisper in the ear was actually for Donald Trump to be able to release a Truth Social statement, to okay a Truth Social post so he can be first to market. But after 2 years of unlimited death and destruction, unlimited genocide with American weapons, with American political cover, it seems like this ceasefire deal is a little bit different than the previous ceasefire deals in the sense that both Hamas has agreed to it, and also the Palestinians seemingly believe that the ceasefire is permanent. I don't know exactly what is the reason for this level of confidence, but I am actually excited at the prospect of this deal happening. I'm excited. I'm excited that people are. I'm excited that people believe it. I mean, this is more celebration, I think, than the previous iteration of the ceasefire. Breaking news from DropSite: the chief negotiator for the Palestinian resistance, Hamas's Dr. Khalil al-Hayya, says the resistance have received guarantees from U.S. and mediators that the war has ended permanently. But then again, I keep repeating myself over and over again. I hope Israelis nuke your house. I feel like if Israel nuked my house, that would be really bad for a lot of people. Like that would be, I live in West Hollywood. Like you're demanding that the entire city of West Hollywood and most of Los Angeles get so that Israel can kill me. That's strange. Like that's a very, I'm sad two of my favorite creators are at odds. Yeah, whatever, dude. Like I understand why you want me to die, I think. Like I get it. Because I'm anti-Israel and you're pro-Israel and you're pro-genocide. But it is very strange how much you want me to die that you are perfectly fine with like killing 1 million people as collateral damage. Anyway, let's continue.
2 years of devastating war. This morning, President Trump celebrating a historic step to peace, telling Fox,
"This is more than Gaza. This is peace in the Middle East, and it's an incredible thing."
Trump announcing on social media what he describes as the first phase of the peace plan, saying Hamas will release all of the hostages very soon.
We think they'll all be coming back on Monday. So it looks like that's the thing. And that'll include the bodies of the dead.
In return, Israel will withdraw its troops to an agreed-upon line. It comes after months of tense negotiations and deadlock. At the White House yesterday, the president interrupted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, seen handing him a note and then whispering in Trump's ear. Photographers catching the handwritten message. "We need you to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce deal first." Shortly after, the president doing just that, announcing to the world what he describes as the first step to strong, durable, and everlasting peace, calling it a great day and thanking mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey who worked to make it happen. The deal also negotiated by Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. The families of the hostages welcoming the news. The White House sharing this video overnight of some of them speaking with the president and Commerce Secretary.
What do you guys have?
Bro, it's crazy. The Israeli hostage families wanted Donald Trump to address the nation when he visits the region, if he does. And the amount of play that Donald Trump is getting off of this, in spite of the fact that he literally did everything but pull the trigger on tens of thousands of Palestinians. Like, he did everything. He basically also pulled the trigger. You know what I mean? It's like, it's American bombs, it's American money, it's American political cover. And in many instances, it was straight up the Americans giving fake assurances to Hamas so that Israel could try and kill them. Like, if Donald Trump had done this in January, then fair is fair, right? Fair is fair. Like, that would have been even worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize look. But the fact that he continued this for another 8 months is so crazy. Why now? A few folks have asked me in the course of interviews today this question: why, if the basic framework of this deal has been around for so long, did it take until now for us to get to this point? A combination of factors. Yusuf Munayyer speculates. One, the continued pose of the Israeli military's genocidal campaign, the continued costs of the Israelis' military's genocidal campaign. These are underreported, but have been consistently growing. The Israeli economy took a major hit, the Israel reserve suffering as well, an unprecedented suicide crisis amongst the troops, growing calls for sanctions in Europe and elsewhere, and growing diplomatic isolation. Despite these only growing costs, only negotiations, not the military operations, have led to the captives being released. The costs were adding up significantly, including in U.S. public opinion. The Israeli strike in Doha and Gaza military operation, these sent a clear message to all involved that the Israeli government is willing to throw away the lives of Israeli captives, meaning that the value of the captives in negotiations could quickly wane. The Trump card, for a variety of reasons, including engaging with global leaders, wanting to save Israel from itself, and the captives from their own irrational and wanting global recognition for peacemaking, Trump decided this was the best moment to lean in. Lastly, and importantly, just because this confluence of factors came together to produce this moment does not mean they will remain in place and continue to create incentives to make the deal sustain, especially past the initial exchange. I don't think that the genocide becoming far too costly for Israeli society at this stage was a significant enough factor for Israel to stop doing the genocide. I do think that fascism is as we have talked about quite a bit, it is this, and it is suicidal. And I think Israel would literally, I could totally see if left to its own devices, the Israeli government would burn through everything to continue its ethnic cleansing campaign, to continue its belligerent occupation, to continue its ridiculous incursions into all of the other regional actors, ally and foe alike. And I do think that it's more so a recognition that enough is enough. I think this is more so an American-led push to be like, it's done. I don't think Israel would stop. I don't even think Israel wants to stop. If this was left up to Israel, they would do the same thing that they did with Iran or tried to do with Iran. That to me shows that these guys are not all there, okay? That to me shows that these guys are a little insane. How are you not banned, lol? I don't know. Why would I be banned? It doesn't work that way. Like, you assuming that I should be banned doesn't mean that I did something ban-worthy. Probably a lib take, but I'm believing that this timing is now more than Nobel Peace Prize than it ever deserves. Okay, I'm going to give you guys something even more suspicious. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee actually picked its nominees, not last week, obviously, but in January. And that was when there was the initial, that was when the nominees, like the top contenders were picked, which is suspicious timing, considering that that was when the first ceasefire had been implemented. Not to get all blue and on with this shit, but there is a situation here where they could have already nominated him and actually given him a fair shake because of the initial ceasefire implementation. And then they turned around and were like, oh my God, it's bullshit. Obviously that ceasefire fell apart. Then there was the famine. Then there's the global recognition of a genocide. But that means he could have still been in contention, right? He could have still been a part of the competition since that's when the first ceasefire was implemented, and he got a lot of props for it initially. So all I'm saying is All I'm saying is giving Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize for this is basically like giving Hitler the Nobel Peace Prize for Hitler. Okay? It's so ridiculous. But the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize is supposed to actions taken in 2024. They're not supposed to consider anything that happens in this year. I don't know if they'll follow that, but generally that's what happens. I don't know. But like I said, giving Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize for ending the in Gaza would be akin to giving Hitler the Nobel Peace Prize for ending the Holocaust. Okay? Another clip up close, the Rafah border. Oh, this is disqualifying? Yeah. Give Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize. He deserves it. Oh, God. So, yes. If we are libbing it up a little bit to assume that the timing of this is like dedicated to the Nobel Peace Prize, I can see that. I can entertain that. And I'm actually giving you additional information that potentially points to him being even up as a nominee because of the initial ceasefire that took place, which was right around the time that was taking place. But I digress.
To say to President Trump, thank you. They're all coming back on Monday.
In Israel, a similar scene of joy. The sister of one hostage popping champagne to celebrate her upcoming release. There are 48 remaining hostages, 28 of whom are confirmed dead. It was 2 years ago this week that Hamas attacked Israel, killing 1,200 people, taking 250 hostage. Since then, Israel's response, killing more than 67,000 Palestinians, including 20,000 children, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. Gaza decimated. These satellite images showing the stark difference from before the war to now. Nearly the entire population of Palestinians displaced and in desperate need of aid. But the war has raged on, efforts to solve the crisis going nowhere. Previous ceasefires failing after...
I do think that all of the people that are still running with the 67,000 number are going to look incredibly silly. It's a horrifying number in and of itself, but it is a dramatic undercount due to a multitude of factors that I've described over and over again. Israel completely eviscerating the healthcare infrastructure, Israel doing double tap strikes on areas that they strike first, and then when before the dust settles, when the recovery teams come in, they strike the ambulances and the people that are trying to recover people from the rubble. This has made it so that it is virtually impossible to actually figure out how many people are dying directly to rocket strikes, directly to Israeli strikes, Israeli munitions. Because remember, the 67,000 number is the number of Palestinians that are either directly shot or directly bombed, and then they're recovered and they go to the hospital, and those death tolls are calculated in the hospital. Right? Those are numbers that are severe undercounts due to the fact that the healthcare infrastructure is completely destroyed there. Okay? That's part of the reason why the number hasn't really moved that much since like last year. And we know that Israel has killed thousands of people because we've seen Israel kill thousands of people. Right? So that is a significant undercount.
Both sides accused the other.
Especially considering that we also have to factor in deaths due to famine or deaths due to lack of access to medicine, lack of access to proper health care. Like, there are going to be there are already so many other casualties in this process that are not directly calculated as like, preventable deaths, for example, are not calculated as direct deaths by the Gaza Health Ministry. The Gaza Health Ministry's undercount, and this is like something that they openly admit, is specifically if someone is shot or bombed by Israel and they make it to the hospital and they log the person at the hospital as a body count from Israel. So if there are no hospitals to actually log people, then there is no way to know what the true number is. And on top of that, it doesn't actually factor in the externalities, the external deaths. Okay? There's also a fuck ton of people who are still lying under the rubble. There are people who are lying in mass graves, for example. they recovered a bunch of mass graves in the aftermath of like taking over the hospitals again. After Israel will like release the hospital after sieging it, and they'll find like mass graves and shit, and then they'll add that to the death count. So most estimates are far higher than the number that Israel's suggesting. The Lancet study suspects that it's, I think it was like a couple months ago, that the estimate right now is over 680,000. And this actually corresponds to Israel's own numbers as well. Israel's own numbers have dictated that the number of, if you look at the number of Palestinians that were in the Gaza Strip prior to October 7 versus what Israel thinks is the number of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip right now, there's like around 700,000 people that are no longer being counted as being in the Gaza Strip. Now, of course, there's probably a couple 100,000 that have been able to escape the siege and have been able to have gotten like medevac or went to like secondary refugee camps in like the UAE and places like that. But even then, there's still a severe undercount in comparison to the 67,000 number that everyone is still floating around.
Of violations. 10 days ago, the president, standing side by side with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, unveiling their 20-point peace plan to end the war. The president then warning Hamas to agree to the deal, or else saying all hell would break out. And while the president and the world this morning are celebrating this first phase and the upcoming release of the hostages, big questions remain about what comes next and whether it will lead to lasting peace. Now, President Trump says he will likely go to Israel in the coming days, where Prime Minister Netanyahu has invited him to address the Israeli government, and Trump even suggesting he could visit Gaza, too.
Martha, tell us about the role President Trump played in bringing all of this about.
Well, Robin, there's no question that if this goes as planned, if we see those remaining hostages freed and Israel begin its withdrawal, it is a remarkable achievement, and President Trump most certainly deserves credit for his role. He has done this through diplomacy, pressure, and the sheer force of his personality and persistence. He dispatched diplomats again and again, made threats just in the last few days to Hamas, saying again if they did not sign the deal, all hell would break loose. And they had the bombing of Iran as an example of that. But perhaps most importantly, he pushed Benjamin Netanyahu in ways his predecessor and others have not, Robin.
And what finally got the two sides to this point? And will it be able to get phase 2 off the ground?
Well, you know, Robin, throughout this process, President Trump never wavered in his support for Israel. But when Netanyahu ignored much of what Trump was trying to accomplish by continuing to bomb over the last few months, Trump laid down the hammer with Netanyahu, essentially saying enough is enough. Trump had also told Netanyahu that he was opening indirect negotiations with the Iranians, which put even more pressure on the Israeli prime minister. Obviously, the coming days will prove whether the rest of the plan comes to fruition. But if those hostages are freed, which would leave Hamas without their major bargaining tool, this is a huge moment for Donald Trump.
It certainly is. All right, Martha, our thanks to you.
So I want to thank everybody for being here. As you know, last night we reached a momentous breakthrough in the Middle East, something that people said was never.
Yeah. Are you strangling Kaya? Yes. I'm strangling her. She's being strangled as we speak. Really fucked up. Oh my God, Kai left the bed. Hasan quick shocker again on purpose in front of 30,000 viewers, as I'm known to do. Do you think there's anything to be said about the timing of this being so close to October 7th? Coincidence? I mean, I'm sure that played a role. I'm sure the Nobel Peace Prize was part of it, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore, dude. I don't know anything anymore. I just like it's fucking crazy. It's a... Because the major thing here that is different than the previous iterations, the major thing here that's different than the previous like fake ceasefires and whatnot that Israel violated almost instantly after they got like a batch of hostages, was that there is more confidence from the Hamas side. There's more confidence from the Palestinian side. There's more confidence from the resistance side that this deal will actually stick. And I don't know. I don't know if this will actually stick or not, especially considering that Israel is still fucking bombing the Strip. You know what I mean? It's just, I'm trying to make sense of this. But the only thing that gives me confidence about this, is not the motivations of the Trump side at all, but instead the confidence that I've seen from the leaders of the resistance and also the Palestinian people.
Interrupt you. We have Hamas's chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya speaking. This is one of the first times that a Hamas official has been commenting on this trucial ceasefire. Here he is.
Dear our Palestinian people, our Arab nation, our Muslim nations, our people of Gaza, Gaza of heroism and dignity and martyrdom, dear free people of the world, the whole world was impressed when they saw all the sacrifices that you've been showing and given and all the steadfastness. You engaged in a war that the world has never seen before, and also you were able to face and stood in the face of the violence and aggression and barbarism of the Israeli occupation of the enemy, and you stood there and your will has never been broken. You were able to continue to fight, and you were able to resist famine and the loss of your beloved ones and the losses of your homes and money. You've lived in tents, and also you've lived under the stones of destroyed houses, and you stayed there. You were not disappointed. We are here living the second anniversary of October 7 fight and revolution, and we are here standing before all those who started this resistance, including the martyrdom al-Sinwar, Muhammad Haniya, and also Yahya al-Sinwar, and also the martyr Yahya Dif, and all his companions of the resistance, those who were chosen by God and they kept their promises to God. We are here in the face of all those who were fighting from point zero, and they stood there and they were able to face all the tanks of the army, and they were able to break and make all the plans of the enemy fail, including the famine and the anarchy that they started to provoke. You were aware and you were able to break all their and make all their objectives fail. Your brothers were sitting in the negotiations tables and keeping your priorities and your independence in their minds and hearts. Since day one of this war, the occupation and the enemy continued to commit genocides and try to abort all the initiatives and attempts of the mediators. And when we started a ceasefire on January 17, they quickly revoked and did not keep their promise, and they were faithful to their reputation of always creating lies. And despite all this, we continued the negotiations, the indirect negotiations that took a long time because of all the manipulation as they were trying to make all the negotiations fail. However, we've never spared any efforts in order to put an end to this aggression and genocidal war. We have behaved in a very responsible way towards the Trump plan.
Bro, this is the reason why I don't feel confident. I don't know where Hamas is getting this confidence that America will abide by the security guarantees. But Trump has asked what guarantees he can give that Israel won't resume bombardment once it gets its prisoners and captives back. And Trump says, we'll see. This doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in me. If the U.S. is trying to speed run through the 2% global credibility it retains after the genocide, publicly agreeing to a ceasefire with extreme fanfare, and then breaking it immediately would be the best way to do it, I just don't think that America cares. Like, we're on our villain arc. Israel has been on its villain arc. And I think it's very dangerous when you have the hegemonic superpower under the guidance of Donald Trump openly lean into being the villain, okay? Because when America recognizes, like, America's always been a villain if you're in the global south. But America has never recognized this villain status. Okay? Recognition of your villain status when you have unlimited power of global domination is very different than the way you behave if you are trying to present yourself as a force of good around the world. Okay? Make no mistake. When you say, oh no, I'm the bad guy, that's when you start bombing ships on the coastline of Venezuela, for example, and you say, what are you going to fucking do about it? America already has this unlimited power, and America has already used this unlimited power. America has tried to at least abide by some kind of like international standard that they change around depending on what their goals are, right? Like they try to make it seem as though they're the world police and not entertain the notion that they're doing this because they're evil and there's not really anything you can do about it. I think that's definitely a change of attitude. That's definitely a change of attitude. It's a change of pace. And I think it's a bit scary to see where America would take it if they were to just be like, yeah, we're villains. Because America, like when a country is unrestrained and doesn't care about being like a global pariah, they behave like Israel. Imagine America, which has already done a lot of Israel-style things around the world, openly doing it in the same way that Israel is doing, where it's like, what are you going to fucking do about it? Yes, we're evil. What the fuck can you say about it? We're the United States of America. I feel as though that's a new level of villainy. That means that America would be even more unrestrained. As I have stated before, soft power initiatives are very important because in the absence of soft power, all you have that remains is hard power. Hard power is military intervention, boots on the ground warfare. Okay? So when you have 800 military bases, those only look like 800 different military, 100 plus different security cooperative agreements because of all the soft power initiatives. If you no longer do any soft power around the globe, people are going to look at that as 800 different invasions. Okay? That is very different. That is a logistical nightmare that even the United States of America and all of its like imperialist ambition can overcome. This is something that seemingly the Trump administration has just refused to reckon with. I mean, the U.S. aid stuff was a great example of this, right? In some ways, moving U.S. aid directly under the CIA once again, so there's no like separation between like the State Department and the CIA in that regard, and then cutting ties with a lot of like soft power initiatives that America had around the world in an effort to gain favor with the local population, so it makes it much easier when America wants to do any sort of intervention, like dropping that and then saying no, we're just going to go gung ho on the military side like that. That's a terrifying prospect. This is how empires fall. Okay? This is how empires have fallen over and over again. Yeah. Damning indictment of the last administration from one of Israel's back channel negotiators who says the same agreement was on the table a year ago, but Biden and his advisors wouldn't take it. This is from Times of Israel, reported from Branko Marcetic, writer for Jacobin. But this is reporting coming from Times of Israel. What we should also know is that this deal could have been done a long time ago. As I've said over and over again, by the way, Hamas agreed to all the same terms in September 2024 as outlined in the 3 weeks deal that I had received in both written and voice messages in Arabic and English. But at that point, the Israeli negotiators responded that the prime minister did not agree to end the war, even though the 3-week deal proposal landed on the desk of President Biden. His person in charge, Brett McGurk, refused to stray from the bad deal that he was negotiating. Work in the back channel. I met with members of the American negotiating team in October 2024, and they were as frustrated as I was with their inability to convince Biden and Biden's people to look seriously at the deal on the table. The Qataris invited me to Doha in October 2024, and I presented to them the deal that Hamas agreed to, which they were fully aware of, but they said that without the American adoption of the plan, nothing could be done because the obstacle was Israel, not Hamas. That is the same message I received from the Egyptian intelligence. Hamas was ready for a deal to release all the hostages, not to govern Gaza any longer, and an end to the war. But Israel was not prepared to go ahead. Trump doesn't get off easy either. As Baskin says, he could have forced Netanyahu to take a deal at any point in the last 9 months. Once again, double vindication. As I told you, this would have been very different. My outlook on Donald Trump would have been very different. This is what I was talking to with Bradley Martin. This is what I was talking to Bradley Martin about, where it was like Trump is not actually interested. Wait, are we trusting Times of Israel now? Wait, what are you talking about? You have to look at what their biases are. This is one of the Israeli negotiators. And yes, the Israeli negotiators, as we've seen with like Daniel Levy, for example, are absolutely more honest about the terms and conditions. They're absolutely more honest about the terms and conditions that are being reported on. I cover Israeli news more than I cover Western media when it comes to issues that pertain to Israel and issues that pertain to Gaza. They don't have to do the propaganda that like the New York Times has to do, for example, which is precisely the reason why they can be more honest about all of the shortcomings or who's truly responsible for an inability to who's truly responsible for like setting up new hurdles. On September 19th in the late evening, Witkoff called me and said, "We have a plan. We had a long conversation. And I supported what the Americans were planning, and I made few suggestions on how to get Hamas on board. I was asked to convince the Hamas leadership that Trump was serious and wanted the war to end. Throughout the last months, I have been in contact with 8 members of the Hamas leadership outside of Gaza. 3 of them engaged with me in discussions. I did not make suggestions regarding the Israeli side because for over a year, I believe that if President Trump decides the war has to end, Trump will force Netanyahu into the agreement." That is exactly what happened. Remember, it was always one fucking phone call. Always. So whenever people say, "Oh, what are you talking about? Like America doesn't have that kind of motion here. Israel's a sovereign nation." No, the fuck it's not. It was always one singular phone call. This is one of the closest you can get in terms of like foreign policy. This is the closest you can get to one singular phone call to end something. Okay. Obviously, you can't do that with Russia. Russia's a foreign adversary. They have their own ambitions. Russia is not attached to the hip to unlimited support. Russia doesn't actually get to do whatever it's doing with unlimited support from the United States of America in the same way that Israel does. That is precisely the reason why it took one phone call. This is also very important. Hasan, do you think Kamala would have won if Biden took the deal? Oh my God. I'm not even kidding. If Joe Biden did not spend every fucking waking moment dreaming about murdering more children in Gaza and didn't like let his ultra Zionist advisors basically run the fucking show at the behest of Israel, and they did stop Israel at any point, they would have won unimaginable amounts of favor. Unimaginable amounts of favor. They could have made it seem as though it was Kamala's pressure, for example, that convinced Biden to finally put an end to the genocide. Okay? Abso-fucking-lutely. Think about how many people would have celebrated, even if they had like a real convincing ceasefire. Even if they had an extended ceasefire, the one that Donald Trump, when he came into office, pushed Israel to engage with. Even if the Democrats did something of that sort, at least leading up to the election, they probably would have eaten good off of that. Okay? Any sort of gesture in the affirmative, any sort of gesture in a positive direction against any sort of gesture in the positive direction would have won a tremendous amount of favor. Would have won a tremendous amount of favor for the Democrats. Anyway, let's get back to the Hamas confirmation of the Gaza ceasefire, calling it a victory for resistance and steadfastness.
And we have provided an answer that guaranteed the rights of our people and to stop the bloodshed, and that would also guarantee our vision to put an end to this war. Our negotiating delegations arrived for the negotiations armed with goodwill, and that's why we were able, together with the resistance factions with whom we have discussed, in order to provide an agreement that we are able to give to our people, our heroes, and we are happy we have reached a deal for ceasefire to put an end to the aggression and also to proceed to a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of the army and to allow the aid to enter to Gaza and to open the Rafah crossing from both sides. There will be also an exchange of prisoners, including 250 prisoners who will be released, those who were sentenced for life, and in addition to 1,700 of the children of Gaza who were arrested after October 7. Also, children and women, all children and women will be released. We have received guarantees from the mediators and also from the U.S. administration, confirming all of them that the war has ended permanently. And we will continue to work with the national force in order to resume and to make sure that we achieve all the other steps and to achieve all the aspirations of our people, and also until we are able to have our state with Jerusalem as its capital. In this context, we would like to hail our people wherever they are in the West Bank of 1948, in our diaspora, and also we would like to...
I know this deal was available during Biden's admin, but is this article just working to glaze Trump a bit, massaging his image for the Peace Prize? I think that there is obviously some fucking glaze taking place here with respect to... Wait, hold on. There is obviously some glaze taking place here with respect to like Donald Trump actually pushing, but I suspect that there is a reason for it, and that is because Donald Trump is actually pushing, it seems, so far. But once again, I don't know. I don't know if this is a real... I don't know if there's real assurances here. I don't know. Control of NSO is leaving Israeli hands and is expected to pass the Hollywood producer and financier Robert Simmons. The massive deal that would turn over the world's most prolific zero-click spyware to American ownership still has to be approved by the Israeli Defense Ministry. This is very grim when you consider the previous scandals regarding NSO, including the fact that Pegasus ostensibly cannot operate on American phone numbers, which is why the FBI experimented with their own version. This would presumably change that paradigm. NSO is the world's most successful cyber company, for those who don't know, responsible for the proliferation of their sophisticated spyware throughout the globe. They work on behalf of Israel to coerce third world governments into guaranteeing their votes at the United Nations in exchange for their tech. It is perhaps the most prolific spyware that exists out there. Pegasus allegedly was utilized by allegedly Mohammed bin Salman against Jeff Bezos. If you recall, there's a reason why Jeff Bezos no longer is married to his wife, because there were some leaks off of his phone. There were some leaks that came from his phone at the time that showed that he was actually rizzing up ladies, and then that led to their relationship falling apart. And anyway, this is used by the Indian government to spy and arrest every anti-government journalist. Yeah, Jeff Bezos basically had to hire the most comprehensive private security apparatus that existed on the planet at the time to force every journalist to stop them from covering the story about the MBS leaks. That's how they packed that shit up. And because he's a fucking billionaire, he gets to do that. You're kind of selling it by saying it catches cheaters. I mean, it was Mohammed bin Salman using it against Jeff Bezos. After there was after their relationship soured because of Jamal Khashoggi being chopped up and assassinated and had a bone saw used on him in the Istanbul consulate. Why are you using the word Riz? You are 62, sir. Listen. Even us old guys should be able to use the word Riz sometimes, okay? Let an old man have a little bit of fun. But in any case, these are, even with all of the endless tools, understand, even with all of the capabilities that Israel has and Israel advocacy groups have on U.S. soil in all around the Western world, they still were incapable of overcoming the sea of negative coverage due to their grand ambition being so violent. Okay? Their ambition here was genocide. And it turns out, even with the limited amount of information that you could get from social media from Palestinians directly, that was enough for people to go, this is horrifying. I don't fuck with this at all. I don't like this at all. We need to put a stop to this. That paired up with the incredible audacity, the arrogance, the sheer entitlement that you heard, that you saw with your own two fucking eyes, with your own two ears from every Israeli envoy made this unavoidable, made this reality unavoidable. And here we are, holy Toledo. For the first time in American history, voters sympathize more with Palestinians than they do with Israelis, which is crazy. It kind of shows how fucking insanely twisted the American public is in general. This is a story that is both good and bad. It's good because in spite of the unlimited media propaganda apparatus that consistently contextualized every single thing that fucking Israel was doing as something that they had to do. You know, every dead child was contextualized in real time by an Israeli occupational force rear admiral or whatever, right? In spite of that, in spite of the faucet of misinformation, the faucet of propaganda, Americans still recognize the truth. Americans still slowly but surely saw the truth. So that's one thing. That's the good part about this. But the bad part about this, of course, is that it's still a +1 sympathy. It's still a +1 sympathy for Palestinians after 2 years of Palestinians experiencing genocide. That means there's still a long way to fucking go. Americans are some of the most propagandized people on the planet, straight up.
Yeah, this war caused a historic shift in public opinion on how Americans view the Middle East conflict. What are we talking about here? Who voters, Israelis or the Palestinians? Back in October of 2023, it was the Israelis by 48 points. Look at this shift. Now we're talking about the Palestinians by a point. I looked back at every single poll that I could possibly find since this question was first asked in the 1980s. This is the first time ever in which the Palestinians had any sort of lead on this particular question. It is very clear that this war caused a historic shift away from the Israeli position in the middle.
Like even now, when Mr. Holy Toledo himself says this war, that's propaganda. He might not even be aware that he's engaging in propaganda, but it is propaganda. The United Nations has openly declared this to be a genocide. Okay? That means that this liberal news outlet is actually outflanking the United Nations in terms of doing pro-Israel propaganda, calling this, after the United Nations fucking called it a genocide, still calling it a war is propaganda. Now, sometimes Palestinians call it a war. Sometimes I even call it a war, right? But if you're not actually, if you have never at any point called this a genocide and you just have only called it a war, then it's propaganda. It's that simple, okay? And also, here are the results for that. I am going to give you a media confidence metric. This is directly what I talked about on that panel that I participated in the other day. In 2 years, since October 7, agenda-setting Sunday shows, CNN's State of the Union, NBC's Meet the Press, and ABC's This Week have not featured a single Palestinian guest. I wrote about how the U.S. media shuts out Palestinians while musing about the particulars of the genocide. And the only time they ever had someone who's ostensibly Palestinian was Jake Tapper having Ahmed Fouad al-Khatib on. And he works for the Atlantic Council. He works for the Atlantic Council. And he works literally as a part of the think tank apparatus of one of the two belligerents. America is a belligerent in this. Okay, America is a participant in this genocide. It is ridiculous. Does anyone have that media confidence report that I saw the other day. Like people's confidence diminishing in media since like nosediving since like the war in Iraq, the war on terror. Because I saw like trust in media is at an all-time low at 28% in the United States of America. Republicans' confidence in mass media report to news fully, accurately, and fairly now at 8%. Okay? And I want to show you this. Americans' trust in mass media from 1972 to 2025. Okay? There are a lot of complex reasons for this. Okay? There are some justifiable reasons for diminishing confidence in mainstream news. There are also absolutely ridiculous reasons for why Americans have diminished confidence in mainstream news, like during COVID, for example. COVID was a major blow to media, and you can see it. You can see it happening in real time here. When you see a huge dip from 2019 all the way down to 2024. Part of that is the explosion of social media news. Okay? The explosion of social media news. But overall, a big part of the reason why people that say a great deal, a fair amount, okay, the reason why that has dipped to 28% is, if you noticed, post 2001, there are some significant dips here. Okay, I've said this before, but I think the Iraq War and the illegal nature of the Iraq War and the justifications for the Iraq War from mainstream outlets shred their credibility in the eyes of a lot of Americans. Okay, Iraq War was a huge blow. People had a lot of questions post 9/11. Not a lot of those questions were left addressed. There was a lot of like conspiracy theories floating around that created some instability for mainstream news and mainstream resources. But think about it. Like we went from in 1999 at 55% to in 2000 to 51%, all the way down to now 28%. There were certainly good reasons in this process. I think like being skeptical of mainstream resources when they openly lie to the public, like with the Iraq War, that plays a role in this, right? That makes people lose confidence in mainstream resources. And I think, and this is something that I warned about quite a bit, the reason why this skyrocketed back in the first Trump administration was because they were very critical of Donald Trump. Okay? They were unimaginably critical of Donald Trump. They kept heavily scrutinizing Donald Trump every fucking day. So they recovered from 32% all the way back up to 45% by 2018. But then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, that's when things took a nosedive turn. Okay? Obviously, a big part of the story is access to the internet and the internet access becoming way broader. Access to the internet becoming a more significant aspect of news consumption. Because, like, I would say that even in this era, from 2000 all the way to like 2013, 2014, you didn't actually have, you had the blogosphere, you had Air America, you had like some critical voices. Having said that, however, it wasn't like as, like people didn't actually get most of their news consumption from resources that were outside of mainstream and legacy publishers, right? I don't buy the Iraq angle on media distrust. Media in America knows Bush admin lied about Iraq, but they're not really aware of the media's role in selling it. I think that played a big role. I think that it's conspiracy theories and the Iraq war in general, like people's questions about 9/11 being left unaddressed, and also the media's advocacy, consistent advocacy for the Iraq war certainly played a role. I think that people, when they say we've been lied to, the Iraq war was a lie, we've been lied to about the war on terror, they also are talking about fucking mainstream resources, mainstream news. Straight up. There is a reason why Jon Stewart blew the fuck up in this time period. I mean, I'm going to chalk this up to me being a fucking massive loser who was super invested in American news even back then. But I still recall Jon Stewart being one of the only fucking voices that was critical of both the Democrats and the Republicans, and also openly critical of the Iraq War and the war on terror. That was the peak of the Daily Show. So if a lot of people were tuning into Comedy Central and there were articles being written about, like, why is a comedian the voice of change in news? Like, why is it up to a comedian to actually be the only trusted resource in mainstream news? Like, when all those articles were written, that means that people were not trusting mainstream media. But I think ultimately, a big part of the diminished confidence comes from COVID. During COVID, independent media exploded in popularity, and there were a lot of grifters who basically took advantage of the information vacuum that existed in this novel virus that was ripping people apart, just murdering people, that ended up killing more than 1 million Americans, right? And all the lockdowns and all the restrictions that frustrated a lot of Americans as well. Like, independent resources, independent media basically blew the fuck up in that time frame, partially because we were locked in to our phones and to our computers. That's when, in 2020, people like myself also blew up and became voices comparable to mainstream resources. But basically, I think it's a combination of people refusing to listen to mainstream resources when they were trying to actively abide by and actively push for whatever the epidemiologists were saying at the time, and obviously that leaned on the side of caution, leaned on the side of restrictions, leaned on the side of, like, pushing for lockdowns and whatnot. And a lot of people wanted news resources to confirm their biases. So they sought out alternatives. And a lot of those alternatives were really fucking bad. So this is the part of the media confidence that I talk about when I say, like, the media was doing the appropriate thing. This is supposed to do. Mainstream media, mainstream resources were doing the appropriate thing and pushing for the best possible measures, no matter how fucking restrictive those measures were, right? In an effort to save people's lives. And that frustrated a lot of people, and that confidence took a nosedive again. And then I think the final blow came from the coverage of Gaza. That's it. The Gaza coverage played a massive role, I think, in this nosedive, because people saw so much death and destruction on their social media. They saw so many murdered children on their social media. And yet, when they tuned into, like, Jake Tapper, CNN, when they tuned into MSNBC, when they read headlines, believe it, like, the juxtaposition of what they saw on social media directly being reported by Palestinians versus what they were hearing from mainstream resources, I think, deeply heightened this fissure. And for people saying, like, Yasha Levine was talking about saying it would be interesting if MAGA abandons Israel before liberals do law, but this is wrong. Liberals have already abandoned support for Israel. Support for Israel's military action in Gaza by party identification shows all the way back in July, Democrats at 8%. 8% of Democrats approve Israel's military action in Gaza. 8%. Okay, Israel's trying to hold on to the 71% like it's their lifeline. Okay, but Democrats have already fucking gone, and so have the independents, really. This is why I say it's fuck Israel o'clock. It's been fuck Israel o'clock. And the more the media actually frames it in a truthful manner, the more other people will also get on board with fuck Israel o'clock. And that will still continue to heighten the contradictions. And it will probably embed deep mistrust in mainstream resources if they don't fucking follow through on the way people are feeling about this and cover this crisis in the moral clarity that it fucking deserves. Okay?
Middle East conflict and towards the Palestinians when it comes to who Americans and voters sympathize with. This, of course, was led by Democrats, because what are we talking about? We went from Democrats favoring the Israelis by 26 points to the Palestinians by 46 points. That is a shift, John, quick math in my head, of over 70 percentage points. But overall, the first time ever in which more Americans sympathize with the Palestinians over the Israelis. Truly a historic shift.
It's a big shift overall, a big shift within the Democratic Party. What about Republicans?
Yeah, it's not just Democrats, though, in which we have seen a real shift of opinion. Even within the Republican ranks, this war has caused real division. What are we talking about? Well, we often talk about by age within the Democratic Party, but what about...
I swear you're paid by the RNC the way you disproportionately attack liberals in America. At least I hope you're getting paid because you're just a useful idiot. If not, you took all the good streams, says. My friend, I call balls and strikes. This week is probably the worst time that you could say this about someone like myself, because I've even glazed Hakeem Jeffries, which is something that I never thought I would ever say. So you're absolutely wrong. When the Democrats actually do right, constituents, like, for example, pushing for a shutdown and really centering the conversation around the Republicans taking away people's subsidies for healthcare, I'm on board. I'm invested. I'm honest. If you see me criticizing the Democrats, let me remind you, it's probably because they're doing something worthy of criticism. Anyway, on that note, we have David Adler, who's coming on right now. David, can you see me?
I can see you perfectly. I can